have Miss Pam Johnston. You got to sing the first lyric. She's a big Bruce Springsteen fan. Pam, we had to have Bruce. It's her favorite. Why do you love Bruce Springsteen so much? Because I get it. I don't love him, but I get it. But you are a disciple. Oh, I do move.
You can just end it here, and I'll just dance.
Yes.
Who doesn't smile when you hear that like riff? I listened to my first Springsteen song in 1978 at Camp Matoka. It was Born to Run. I was like 9. And I never looked back, and I never stopped loving, and I never stopped listening. And it's still like one of the major, it is the major constant soundtrack of my life.
Yep.
And I feel so lucky because here I am in my 50s, and he's still churning out music that fulfills my soul and brings me such joy. And on March 20th, which is next week, I'm gonna see him in Boston. I hope, if they're all
I know. Don't keep canceling,
I feel
Bruce.
so lucky.
Bruce, if you're out there, don't disappoint my Pam.
I know.
You have been in news your whole career. I have had the privilege to work with and work for Pam. Pam was my news director when I was on air. And talk about a bunch of alpha women. I mean, why we're friends sometimes, because we can go, we can argue, but at the end of the day, you and I think, have such a respect for our perspective and what we've put into our lives, and you have had such an amazing career. What was your best day in news, and what's been your worst day in news?
Might be the same day.
I know where we're going. I know.
So there's a group of women here that we all work together at WLVI, Channel 56 in Boston, and my son was 1 year old on 9/11, and I was a new mom, first kid, 9/11, playing with matchboxes, and my husband, who's also in news and is also here today, comes down the steps early in the morning. He's like, you gotta turn the television on. I'm like, what? Something's weird. Something's happening. There was a plane, and we turned on the television and we watched the second plane fly into the Twin Towers. And those planes came from Boston.
Yep.
We found out pretty quickly that those planes came from Boston and crashed in New York, and it took a second.
It took a few because we'll tell the story together because we're together, but it was my day off, and I'm like, what? I got to go to work.
Yeah,
and
really.
It was the
Profound,
craziest,
scary day. I remember calling my sister who worked in Boston at the time, and she was at work, and I said, by the time the second plane went into the tower, and we all began to see, I think we were at war. I think we were under attack. It was such a different world, and America felt so much safer on 9/11, and that day changed us forever. And I was an assistant news director, and my sister worked in Boston. My family's from around here, and I called her. I'm like, get out of town. And then I looked at my husband, and I'm like, I'm going to work. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I got to go to work. And a lot of ladies who are here tonight, and we came to work to tell this story of stories. And I knew it. As I said goodbye to my husband and my son that day, I'm like, I think that this is something that is going to be in history books.
Yep.
And to have to stand around a newsroom and cover it in the moment and live it in the moment and go through the grief and the pain and the horror of 9/11 and what it meant here in Boston and to our community and our country, and bringing that news to our audience and telling them that what was happening in a world in which people still turned to the media and trusted and believed in the media was a privilege and a gift. It's what drives me and thrills me and motivates me and also breaks my heart on the daily.
It was a day that I remember never feeling more responsible about telling this story right And my first stop was to the pilot of Flight 11's house, and I was the first one to get to his family, and it was my job to knock on the door. And then I got sent to Logan to do live shots, and we had no idea if there were bombs planted everywhere. And I looked at my photographer, Rich, and I just held his hand and said, we're gonna be telling this story for a long time. And I was wondering if you would say 9/11, because it was my worst day, but it was my proudest day. It's one time I really felt like a journalist and felt like I had a real responsibility to the viewer. And the way our newsroom, and every newsroom in America, for that matter, came together was a fascinatingly heartbreaking day that
It changed our country,
it
right?
did.
I mean, everything about us changed on that day. The way we stood up and met that moment as local journalists, scrappy local
Yeah.
journalists in a small newsroom, but a moment that really mattered to our community. I felt that that mission of informing and being trusted and telling the story and going there. We went here, we went to New York and we went to Ground Zero and we told the story of the victims of Boston and Massachusetts and where their final resting
Yeah.
place was and the importance of that kind of
I think it changed.
It changed
not
us
just
forever,
us.
but me.
Obviously changed, but it changed the way I left news shortly thereafter because
of people did.
I was kind of like, okay, it's probably not going to be any better or any worse than this. I'm out. I'm good. I had a baby. I'm home. I'm all set. But we still have responsibility. Yet the news right now and the media, I love you, but sorry, a lot of people think the media is the enemy right now. What's different? I mean, she's my good friend, but we got to go there, right?
I have to
right?
say, this has been a hard, the journey. I mean, back in my early part of my career, and still I hope, when you'd say you're a journalist, people were like, oh my God, that's awesome. How cool, very glam. Now people look at you like, gross.
Yeah.
Which breaks my heart. I will say that I now work in public media, and I do feel so inspired. I have found my home and my mission and my passion wrapped up in the promise of public media. It comes with credibility and trust. I hope that
And
is
you guys
missing.
get more than a minute and 30 seconds to tell a story. Yes.
And
I mean, it's important because all I do is teach people how to tell stories in my job. And when you don't take the time and you rush through, what's missed? Everything. Everything important that you want somebody to remember. So the long form news is so important. Documentary is so important. What would you do if you weren't doing this? She'd be a groupie for Bruce Springsteen.
Well, I would go on tour with Bruce Springsteen. I've thought about that a lot in my life, and it's funny, I've like bounced around and done a lot of different things, and it's more than a job for me. For me, it is a calling. I couldn't do anything else because it's in me in such a serious way that it finds me, even when I leave, and it like pulls me back, and it brings the best out of me. So I will always be a storyteller, and I will always support like storytellers and media and voices and being a source for our community. It's just what I believe in.
Pam's my hero. No, it's good stuff. I mean, I've been talking to this lady for 20-something plus years, and it's always interesting to hear from another. Sometimes I feel weird when I say I was a journalist because I kind of felt like I was kind of a reporter until that day. But you also had a very important assignment recently where you were tasked with interviewing Ken Burns about a very important topic. And it wasn't, I mean, listen, nothing against the Dome Room at the Lenox, but you were at Symphony Hall, if I'm in front of how many people?
A lot of
A
people.
lot of people. Interviewing Ken Burns. And you're not necessarily me. I mean, with the microphone and, can go take the show on the road. And as a Jewish woman talking about his documentary about the Holocaust, how much pressure was that?
Or opportunity.
Oh, look at schooling the teacher today.
I have to say, right, so like when that moment came to me, a couple of things that I've learned to do the hard way, I think in my life and my career, more in my career than my life, is like when those moments come and someone says to you, hey, we're going to have one event with Ken Burns at GBH, and we're going to sponsor it at the symphony, and we'd like for you to moderate it, my first instinct is no way.
She called me up and she's like, Katie, hey, what do I do? What do I do? I'm like, you get your ass on that stage is what you do.
You do. You have to rely on your friends and your own personal board of directors to help you through it. But to say yes in the moments where you say no, for me, has always kind of revealed life, like growth and life and opportunities that I didn't think I could do, but I'm like, I'm gonna say yes, and I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna rely on people that I trust and respect to help me get there and dig deep and say yes. And why the hell not me? Because like we are all filled, I have to just say I am filled with imposter syndrome all the time.
Ditto.
And so that was like, I can't, it's not me, and I shouldn't, and I can't, and I'm not worthy. I am not worthy, but I'm going. I'm gonna go out there and do my damn
And
best.
I will tell you that she sent me a picture of herself, like opening up the door backstage, looking at Symphony Hall, and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm about to do it." I'm like, yeah, you are.
Holy.
Yeah, you are. But that imposter syndrome thing is
Real.
real. I suffer from it horribly. I'm motivated by fear. Ask my husband who's in the back. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it. He's like, you do this every time. Every time. And I don't know why I'm motivated by fear, but I do tend to say yes to a lot of things that I'm like, oh.
It's such an important life lesson, especially for women, I think. And I do try to tell my son and my daughter, like, when it feels uncomfortable, and the people who work for me, when it feels uncomfortable and you want to say no and you don't want to do it, that's when you do it.
You probably should.
Like, that's when you do it. It's hard, it's scary, it's uncomfortable, but that's where life happens and you grow.
Wow. Now you've got me stumped, but I look at you and I just see, I guess all these women, I see brightness. You know, you're so determined. And let me tell you, I wouldn't get in your way if anybody said, stop Pam Johnston. I would say, nope, pick another because it ain't gonna be me. How are you gonna teach your daughter to have that same sort of drive, tenacity, perseverance, push through, grit? Because my kids aren't being raised with the same struggle that I had. I mean, I think there's something to be said for growing up in the 70s and come home when the street lights are on and, you know, talk to strangers or not. Or, you know, get a ride home from the guy in the white van. He's probably nice. Got a lollipop? Good. Call it dinner.
You know, I just had I've had a couple of my daughter is in her first year of college, and we all have had some big life lessons. That's a big year. And she just went through sorority rush, which, wow. I went through sorority rush. I don't remember it being very stressful or a big thing or telling my mother about it at all. And I learned so much from my daughter during that process because we're so different. And I just, as a human, am a very focused, driven person. I'm like, that's where I'm doing and that's where I'm going. And if it's not that way, then I'm not going to do it. That's the only way I'm going. And that was not her journey. It was very different. Like, she was dropped from some sororities that she wanted to get into. And she kind of just kept making it work. And at the end, I'm like, you know, you can stop. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. And she's like, Mom, I'm doing this. And wherever I land, it will work out for me. Whoa. I was like, oh my God. I admire you so much. Thanks for sharing that with me. And in fact, I'm learning from her. I'm trying to teach her, but I'm learning from her too. We're different.
My daughter's much more responsible than I am. I look to her and I'm like, Lane, what's the right thing to do? And she's like, Mom, it's to get off the table and stop dancing. It's 2 a.m. Mom, that's my mom. She knew what she got when she was born. Sorry. But
they make us
as much
as we make them. That's what I'm learning now, right? Like, as my children are becoming adults, they are also teaching me and changing me in the best ways versus me just trying to pour myself or my ideals or my parenting structure into them. And that's awesome. They're making me better.
Well, you make me better, and
you
thank
make
you
me better.
so. No, you do. You do.
Thank you.
You hang up first. Thank you, Pam.